today we're shining a light on a place where history, humanity, and activism converge. An institution that refuses to let the stories society overlooked stay hidden. And at the centre of that work is someone whose energy could lift an entire room off the ground. They are a creator, a connector, an unflinching advocate for dignity. My guest brings forward voices we urgently need to hear, and they do it with compassion, courage, and a kind of grounded brilliance that makes the air feel lighter just by being around them. So, with these words as flowers of introduction, I'm humbled and honoured to welcome Jessica Turtle from the Museum of Homelessness.
Thank you, Leon. And it's so good to be here with you on Too Light, Too Dark. I'm so, I'm honored to be amongst the guests that you choose because it's just such a fantastic podcast. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to share with our listeners, we have had a trial introduction in this space already. And I'm not going to lie to anybody because it's authentic, Jess, right? Is that I made some rookie mistakes. So me and Jess have parlayed already. But yeah, I'm super thankful for you to commit more time and to tolerate those rookie mistakes that are part of learning, Jess.
Oh, exactly. It's all part of the rich tapestry of learning. And also, I enjoyed our conversation so much that I'm really happy to be exploring more with you.
Thank you so much. And to whet our appetite, I was thinking about origins and sparks of inspiration. So, what first drew you towards founding and shaping the Museum of Homelessness, Jess?
Well, I have a personal connection to homelessness that I was brought up in a community of homeless people in Cardiff that was founded by my parents, and my dad had been street homeless for many decades in London, and had been involved in community action in London as well. So, as you'll know, Leon, like experiencing homelessness and being an organizer and doing things and figuring out solutions to stuff, those things can often go together, which the general public don't always realize, but we know that about the community, right? So my parents were like organizers as well as experiencing homelessness. So they founded a community in Cardiff in an old tobacco warehouse quite near the docks. That's now the biggest homelessness charity in Wales, the Wallich. And actually, they visited the museum this week. So that was really special for me to have people who are now residents of the Wallich, come and visit the museum, which is inspired by my upbringing in the community. So that would be the personal influence, I think, for founding Museum of Homelessness. And the idea came about because when I got a little bit older, I wanted to leave behind, as many of us do, poverty, addiction, trauma, all the stuff that goes alongside homelessness, and went to carve out a career in the arts and work in museums and work in mainstream arts, and sort of that felt like it could be a bit of an escape for me. But I don't feel like really you can ever fully escape your fate, if you like. So Museum of Homelessness brings together those two things in my life. That experience of homelessness and everything that goes with it at a young age, and then professional training in museums, and also feeling like when I worked in museums, I felt like I could never fully be my full self. I couldn't tell my story, and it wasn't really acceptable to have those experiences and work in museums or work in the arts. So it's still quite a middle upper class sector. So me and my husband, Matt, who's my co-founder, we felt like we could do a little bit better than that and set up a museum where people could be their full selves. And that's what Museum of Homelessness is now. And it's an incredible joy to work on every day.
Yeah, we see, and I see specifically the work that you've done day on day, and really, I suppose, make yourself more visible in terms of the wider public. And what's kind of interesting about the Museum of Homelessness, and I've been thinking about this quite a lot when I've spoken to other community groups and community-led project groups, would be around the ability to be almost, you guys are a symptom of the system, And you guys are then able to sort of work out the classical system frameworks to influence change. Is that kind of you see where you see the Museum of Homelessness working as well?
Would you sort of having the are you saying having the experience would help us to figure out the solutions?
Yeah, so I suppose being closer to the problem is closer to the solution. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. And I think in the where I'm talking to you now from our archive room, and in the archive, we've got so many examples of people finding their own solutions in community, and those solutions really coming from that lived experience. I think it's really important to support and nurture that. I think there's also, though, I do a lot of thinking about this, the whole lived experience thing, because I think there's also examples in our archive of where people with lived experience have been given a lot of power or a lot of resource and things have gone wrong. So when we're talking about like trauma survivor led leadership, I think the right structures, the right support, the right care has to be in place as well, so that we can do the best job that we should. Does that make sense? I don't think we
Yeah.
talk enough in the sector about that. I think there's a lot
Mm,
of like uplifting people with lived experience, but sometimes the nuances of it are not thought through enough, or people get tokenized, or it's like lip service, or people are exploited, or people are put in positions of leadership without being supported with the right training. And
mm,
that's just something we're thinking about a lot in the museum at the moment, with our like trauma survivor led team. How can we best look after ourselves, each other, and the community we're serving with that, working through our own stuff enough that it doesn't get in the way of that.
hmm. That's a great point. And I think what I've seen too often is people don't have the suppose the necessary coaching, the skill
Mm,
to deliver their own experience. And then the bit that happens after that, 'cause it's all very well saying something, and I'm Leon, and I've been through X and Y and Z, and this is how it affected my life during a period of time. And then after that, I went to rehab and da da da. Da. See, already I can kind of narrate that story already, and I wonder if people get the necessary coaching to do that work, use it as a sort of tool of insight, but then have the bit afterwards. And that's what I worry
mm,
about a lot, Jess.
yeah, the aftercare, or the yeah, it's one thing. I think it's definitely one thing telling our story, but it's another thing implementing it for change.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean? Like, I
yeah,
think,
yeah, definitely.
yeah, and I think our stories can be really impactful, and they in themselves can make change. But it's also like, how then do we become equipped with the right skills, knowledge, training, and everything to channel that trauma into tangible change? That, I think you're dead right. That's the bit where the sector's not so good at that. The sector's really good at like supporting people to tell their story.
Yeah,
But it's actually like alchemizing the lived experience into something that's going to make the change, you know? Yeah. And that's
yeah.
what we're trying to do here a little bit. So Museum of Homelessness is definitely like, I put on social media the other day, like I saw someone put on Instagram and made me laugh. Is my entire career a trauma response? And I was like, yeah, definitely. And it is. And that's why we're good in a crisis as well, right? Like I'm really good at responding to crisis. But it's like, how do we actually move beyond that and use, use that trauma response in a variety of ways, you
Hmm.
know?
That's a good segue because I was thinking about the motivations and the drivers. Because I'm going to make an assumption, Jess, that during this journey to get where you are today, has been met with challenge, obstacle, barriers, funding, frameworks, like all this that you have to navigate day on day, sort of operationally. Has that
Huh.
been has that been an accurate assumption there? And maybe you can walk us through that a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think so basically, as a leader of an organization, it's, and also like, it's interesting because I talked to our board about this, like, as as someone who's experienced poverty and hardship, raising the funds for the charity to keep the thing going is always like it can be a source of more anxiety, I think, than like say a charity leader who has a known hardship. They might be
Mm,
more they might I don't know, I don't want to speak for other people, but it's always interesting where I'm like, I want to build up the reserves. I want to keep the cupboard full. And because also I'm quite aware of the responsibility, like we take on people for employment in MOH who come off benefits to work for the museum. So that's a heavy responsibility um that we take very seriously. So I think yeah, there's always a lot of it's always a lot of work basically with the fundraising and it never ends. With that said, I think we've been really lucky with Museum Homelessness that we've built up a really like sound group of funders who really understand it. We've got our winter appeal live at the moment and people are so generous. So we receive a lot of support and we're really lucky in that way. We haven't had a massive struggle with fundraising. Um, and it always reminds me of something that the founder of the Simon community was quite famous for saying. I think I read it in one of his books. He said, if you're trying to bring to life like an idea that's the right thing, doors will open.
mm,
You know, things will flow, doors will open. And I think when you're trying to do something with the right intention, that's the right place at the right time. And people see that people get it in their heart as well. Like people step onto a museum site and they're like, oh, this place feels good.
mm.
And we need more of that in society. So people want to support it. So yeah, I think we are always worried about keeping the wolf from the door, but equally we've been really lucky. And I know it's a really hard time for charities at the moment. Like it's not the same story everywhere. So I have gratitude for that.
Yeah, and I think about sort of what sustains you and what keeps you and keeps you moving forward. And I'm going to use quite an RC word here, quadrant. And
What's
was
that?
so I was thinking about the art, the activism, the culture, and then the last sort of spin and play I see from you guys is like support as well. But
Yeah.
how do you balance them four spin and plays? Because I reckon that is another challenge that must hit you hard day on day.
That's a big one. Just balance prioritization. Very insightful, Leon. So we have yeah, in our strategic plan, which is written by the community and the board and the staff, we have four pillars. We make history, which is our heritage and archive and collection. We have the we educate, which is the artistic like the artistic strand of it. We take action, which is community action and care and therapeutic work. And then we fight injustice, which is the investigations, which is like our, you know, counting everyone that dies homeless, the Dying Homeless Project and all that. Um, and balancing those four things is really hard. It does help that every quarter we have to report to the board on each pillar. And if one's looking like it's had less attention, they'll reflect that with us and say, look, does this need a bit more attention next quarter? And when we do our strategic planning process, we review what we've achieved on each one collectively. And then we all say, oh, we need to do more on this one. And the one that suffers the most is the archive and collection work. And like, because the thing is, being a community based organization, it's quite hard to focus on, say, cataloging a box, cataloging a box of items that's come in when you've got someone, who's experiencing, someone has knocks on the door of the museum, they're experiencing domestic violence, then crisis, or, last night someone was in a really bad way and we were working with his support worker to problem solve that. For in that moment, when that's happening in the community, that's always going to take priority. And as we become more and more of a safe place for the community, it's that work is increasing. So the balance is always going to be like harder to achieve.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's just how it's going to be, I guess, because when someone needs something in front of you, that's never going to be turned down. Do you know what I mean? So that's sort of like where we are with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I also think about, like, if I'm in your shoes, what keeps me motivated? And then sometimes when I've been working in frontline support, whether that be outreach or accommodation or refuge settings, like, what kept me motivated when I was shattered, I was understaffed around me, I was kind of pushing the envelope all the time. And yeah, I wonder if it's righteous anger a lot of the time that keeps us kind of pushing forward. And
Mm,
I'm careful to put righteous with anger as well, because
mm.
in a lot of ways, I'm still quite pissed off at the world. I'm still quite pissed off at systems, maybe just from my own personal experience, selfishly. But is that something that kind of drives you, that righteous anger piece, Jess?
Yeah. So yeah, I think this definitely that comes back to like the museum being a trauma response. And so I've often had a trauma response which is quite fighty. And
Mm.
so quite the energy is quite um quite like that righteous anger. Like that is a really good energy for galvanizing community movement, for carrying out campaigning, protesting, for um battling with adult social care to get someone's care and support needs met, that sort of thing. Um, but that energy is also one that will eventually burn you out if you aren't able to find other ways of channeling the trauma and processing the trauma. And so I'd say the first 5 years of MOH, 5, 6 years was built purely on that energy, really. And the righteous anger, I like that phrase, of really relate to it. And but in since the pandemic, we and this also coincides with me getting sober. Actually, I got sober in 2020, and since then, I've been working on things like trying to learn to rest, keep some balance, um, separate my pain from the pain of other people, because that's one of the things. If we take on people's pain completely as our own, then that's a surefire way to burn out really quick in this work. Um, So doing my own work to make sure that I'm showing up in a way that's useful for the people, not just serving me. So doing all of that work, which I find for me, sobriety was an essential first step to be able to start unpacking all of that. And
Yeah.
so it's moved now from I still get angry and I still channel that righteous anger when I need to for like casework or a certain campaign or something, but it's not consuming me. And I think in that way I'll be able to stay in the job longer and be able to heal at the same time. So that's kind of like, yeah, that's where we're at.
It's a very insightful answer, Jess. Thank you for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
And it resonates with me because I've approached life in a similar way, but from my own individual filter. And it's important to mention that these two polarities oscillate, right? So you just think you're getting the external sorted out, and then all of a sudden, the scales tip again, and it's a constant dance, that, which I think is important to mention and be blatant about from my side, anyway, Jess.
Mm. Oh yeah, God. I mean, I think for me, like the trauma recovery is like there's days where I feel like I've made progress in my healing, and there's days where I feel like I haven't made any. So it's like from what I can gather, is that it's not something that's ever finished.
Mm.
It's like so my traumas took 18 years to form. So I'm not going to undo it in 5 years. I'm not going to undo it in 6 months. I'm not going to. It might be a lifelong practice of living with the imprint of that on myself and just figuring out how I can best work with it rather than thinking there's some magic healing point at the end. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know the answers, but it's interesting finding out, and it's certainly better than being in really extreme addiction situation or doing those sort of behaviors that definitely weren't serving me.
and I think about all people who are starting off to support adults who are experiencing homelessness or support in whatever the form. It's really important to be upfront and honest about that, Jess, especially if you're sort of coming into the sector for the first time and going through it. Like, that weight to carry all the time, and then the burden and everything else you've got on top. And if you've been through certain things, which a lot of us have in this space, right?
Yeah.
You need to be open and honest about how you're feeling, otherwise you'll drown real quick, Jess. And that's not me trying to be scary, but it's truth.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that connection to self. So knowing, being able to do that reflection, being able to really, like, that's it, be open and honest with like myself, also with other people, about what's going on for me right now. So when we do a bit trauma training and stuff like that, and we you know, it used to be people would say, what's wrong with you?
Mm.
So as practitioners, we're working with people who are traumatized. We'd say, "What's wrong with you?" Then that went out, and then it was like, "What happened to you?" Which is fine. It's slightly less pathologizing, but it still makes the person retell their story again and again and whatever. In my training that I've done in Gabor Mate's method of compassionate inquiry, he said the only question that matters is what's going on for you right now. And what's going on for you right now is relevant for us to ask the people that we're working with, but also always be asking ourselves. So, like, what's going on for me right now? How am I responding? Is something being activated in me that's probably not in the service of this person or myself? And being able to do that inward reflection, like in the check-ins that we build in our organization in the morning, in the afternoon, but also through the day where we can. And that connection to self, being open and honest with yourself, is, I think, is so essential to this work, you know, but it's very hard. It's a very difficult practice to actually do.
Yeah, it dials into the point you made earlier around the almost the lived and living experience being within your organizational DNA. It's a difficult beast at the best of time organizationally, and then there's the individual factor and the team factor. So I can definitely see that you're taking a lot of care around that, Jess, and I'm not surprised, to be honest, because it's sort of in keeping with what you guys do over there. And I was thinking about stories, and I was thinking about objects, because I've went through a real academic period of loving object relations theory and watching my kids grow up and thinking about their little blanket that used to keep them all the time and comfort. And then think about what you guys do in terms of objects. And a question I was dying to ask you last time but didn't get round to it was, how can a single donated item to the museum
Mm.
carry a whole life's worth of narrative, Jess?
Mm. That's such a good question. It doesn't carry a whole life's worth of narrative. And I think one person who gave a stick that they carved, it's amazing. The stick is, it's been carved. It's a story of recovery. He's put it back together as a walking. It's gorgeous. But he says in that story, he says, this just a little chink into one person's experience of homelessness. So
Mm.
the objects are their moment in time. You know, they're like, it's where that person is in that place and time. It's what that object means for that place and time. But some of them do zoom right out and become extremely philosophical and long ranging. And so, yeah, each one's different. We could never represent a full life though.
I was thinking, well, maybe the way I think it is, it more like a sort of photograph snapshot as somebody's moment in time during life. Is that a better way to think it? Mm.
But the stories sometimes can go back to childhood or can cover a period of time of the person's life.
Mm. And I was thinking about objects. Is there like one object that if I walked into the Museum of Homelessness tomorrow, you would point me to? Or is it such a creative and unique experience that you just sort of go where you feel? But
Mm.
is there ones that stand out to you since you've been open, for example?
It depends upon, say, if a group comes in. So like we had social work students in the other day, and we pulled out the objects that tell stories about lived experience of like bad social work, basically, so they can learn from that. So things that had that threaded through. So we try and tailor to the people's individual needs, or to go within a theme. So when we opened with How to Survive the Apocalypse, we had a certain 6 objects that we showed. We shared that every day with that show, because the theme was creative survival and like how genius the community is when things go to shit. That was the overall theme of, like, you know, it's the apocalypse. You could do a lot worse than learning from people who are homeless. So with that, we shared stories that are tenacious, creative survival, things like that.
How can storytelling be a tool for advocacy? Where is it most
Mm.
powerful, Jess?
With the object stories, they're very powerful when we share them with our everyday museum audience, because they are creating that social connection and myth busting around homeless people. Um, but I think where they're really powerful is when we um, do specific targeted interventions with them. So, for example, the story of the medical notes that I mentioned earlier is really powerful and impactful when it's NHS practitioners who hear it,
Hmm.
who are in a learning space. So we did it with an NHS leadership program. And I know that those people went back into their organisations and wanted to make some practical changes. So therefore, the storytelling there is going to have a tangible impact on people who are using those health services. So I think that's where they can be very distinct.
I want to keep us kind of moving and flowing. I was thinking about when the museum started and to where it is now, and then thinking about how homelessness has shifted and the political landscape changes. Has that changed your priorities or strategies in recent years, maybe post-pandemic, Jess?
Yeah, I think it's just getting worse. So that's why we're doing more of the direct action work, more of the um campaigning. We think on like global terms. So we are interested in the global rise of the far right and what they want to do with homelessness, because they're weaponizing homelessness in the service of their political aims. Some of the discourse you're seeing coming out of America, which has now been made into law over there, leads to a situation where a Fox News anchor can say that our community should have the lethal injection as a response to encampment. So this is the political climate that we're responding to in our work. So whilst I am, we're interested in Labour's policies and what have you, and that stuff is the bread and butter of homelessness charities, we're looking bigger, because these are global forces that are already impacting UK legislation as well, because the same think tanks that have written Project 2025 for Trump are active in UK criminalisation legislation. So it's already here and it's probably going to get worse. So those are the sort of things that are influencing our strategies. And our next exhibition, which is top secret at the moment, but we just started the first community development session for it yesterday. It's going to be banging. That opens in May, and it is influenced by these sort of things that we're thinking about and how we can strategize to respond.
Pretty much since we started this podcast in July, Jess, there's been concerns shared by various guests around the socio-political climate becoming more hostile,
Uh-huh.
the space for civil discourse shrinking, attitudes reaching towards various extremes on both sides, to be honest, Jess, as well. Like,
Mm.
I think that's important to mention too. And yeah, I do worry about that in terms of support provision. I worry about that in terms of somebody new to rough sleeping. I look at it through the lens of lack of affordable housing and, local council lists like off the charts in terms of waiting times, Jess. And it seems like we're going to have to almost fight harder as time moves forward. And again, that's my inner feeling, Jess. I don't know how you feel about that.
Uh, yeah, I think the outlook doesn't look brilliant, does it, for where we're at and where it's going? And I think, yeah, there's a sense of resource scarcity, definitely. Well, we do know, don't we, that there's enough empty homes to house everyone. So it's not
Yeah.
it's not a resource scarcity. It's like it's there, but it's not. It's either not shared, or it's, to be honest, like council voids is something we should talk about. There's so much
Yeah.
council and housing association stock that is in the void system that could be used, and that's just incompetence and
Uh,
mismanagement. And I think, that those sort of issues should be easy wins, really. But I don't know how we've got to this point where so many people are dying whilst homeless, and there's empty properties that are, no, not even in the private market, but in that's social housing, public housing's available, should be available, just isn't being, isn't being decorated quickly enough, or isn't being brought up to standard. So, yeah, the outlook isn't great, but I think what we can do is we can only do what we can in our own sphere of influence. So what we try and do here is create a site where people can connect who might not normally speak to each other, or who might be polarized in online or in sort of everyday life, and making that space where people can actually get to know each other and can just form like compassionate relationships. I think that's got to be a big part of the answer. We need more spaces like that in society. There aren't enough of them. The sort of civic infrastructure is breaking down a little bit, and then social media fills the gap, and that's not good for anyone. So yeah, I don't really know the answers. I share your anxieties about the future, but
Mm.
I think there are things that we can be done relatively simple, but they just might feel a bit radical for the times we're in. But it should be possible.
Yeah, it was interesting. I spoke to somebody who's pushing for policy change in the sort of harm reduction and drug policy generally, and drug usage. And he said that he spoke really closely to the people who got the Portuguese decrim laws over the line. And the
Yeah,
guy from Portugal turned around to him and he said to him that, guess what happened the day after that happened? And the guy was like, no. And he's like, well, the world didn't end, right? Everybody still got up. Everybody still, had their
yeah.
conflicts and stuff. And it made me think, like, because I always thought of like policy changes as kind of multi-layered and partnership and collaboration and getting loads of people around the room. And in fact, something so radical, it seems, was done pretty quickly, but minimum effect, Jess.
Amazing. I love to hear that. So have they decriminalized all everything in Portugal?
Not everything, possession to a certain amount, so that
Hmm.
and also the sort of offer a treatment, so a real clear treatment pathway as well. If you were having problematic drug use and you went
Yeah.
to court and they identified that, there was a treatment pathway offered at first point of contact.
Uh-huh.
Which sounds radical to me sitting here in the UK in the
Yeah.
realm of criminal justice bullshit. It just shows you change can happen, the right
Mm.
people, and it's not as radical as some people on the opposite end think it is, right?
Yeah, it would be great to see some of that quite like brave politics. Sometimes I think here, just back to the concept of like, using empty buildings. It should
Yeah.
be possible, shouldn't it? I'm not saying, I respect, you know, people's right to have property and all of that. Obviously, I'm not saying like seize all property, but there's ways there's ways of using long-term empties. I think there's just so much waste, and that's what really gets to me. Like, it's not right that people are dying outside when there's empty buildings that could be warm, it could be safe havens, could be used in a different way. And I think when my parents started their community, people were given buildings. So so basically they started off sort of squatting. Then the woman who ran the chippy down the road retired. She liked what they were doing, so she donated them a building. And then a tobacco merchant from down the docks donated. He retired, so he donated his warehouse, and that has now grown into something quite remarkable. But in the time we were there, it must have saved thousands of lives. And that
Mm,
was just people being willing to give something, and I don't see that anymore. Not with
mm,
property. It's like it seems psychologically impossible in this country for people to donate a property for something good to happen with it. Do you know what I mean?
mm. Yeah, it points to some sort of schism or some sort of avoidance or something in that nature.
That was the 70s and 80s, not very long ago, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and that speaks to a thing that I've got. Maybe I'm going to sound like a grouchy old man here when I get my Victor Meldrew on, but that sort of genuine kindness and the enactment of empathy, I think if I look at various institutions, and I look at systems, and I look at policymakers, yeah, it feels like there's a dose of compassion and warmth needed, right?
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? Just more of that.
That's all.
Just a bit more, it's like, yeah, I mean, that's what we try and do on this site. We don't always get it right by a long shot, but what I've experienced is when you show people genuine compassion and you meet people's needs, so the organization meets people's needs as expressed by the person on their terms, that's when magic can happen. And again, it's quite simple, so it's not coercing, forcing change. It's not deciding what's best for someone or any of those things, or having a set of services that are rigid. It's meeting people's needs in a compassionate way. And that's just, you can create very strong communities that way. That's what we've lost a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. And when I hear you speak as well, and no doubt your husband and co-founder's got a similar ethos and drive, is that I wonder how long it's taken for you to cultivate that leadership skill. And because a lot of people who are great leaders, they don't actually recognize that they're great leaders, because usually they're very humble. But it feels like you've got a sense of responsibility, plus the drive, plus a bit of the righteous anger that's a bit more cared for now as well. But you're
Mhm.
able to articulate people's needs in a way that brings people together. And is that something you had to work on, Jess, or has that happened just over time?
Oh, I don't know. That's such a good question. I suppose it's felt a little bit like, not to sound weird, but it's a bit like an inheritance or a duty, not a duty, but do you know what I mean? It's like that's what my family did. So I have ended up doing it. And I've learned from both my parents, they had different approach to community building, but it was like I was, you absorb it, but also there's this, my dad, before, when I was little, my dad used to always tell us this story, um, where him and his friends were sleeping down Villiers Street, off the Strand,
Yeah.
and the authorities at the time, so this would have been probably early 60s, the authorities at the time were hosing them down, like sending the fire trucks and hosing them down in the like about 4 a.m. to clear the sleep sites. And he always told the story, and he said, and what we did, he said, we could have given up and moved on. We could have despaired. We could have felt sorry for ourselves. But what we did, we hatched a plan. And so they all came up with this plan where they found out where the trucks were coming from, which was the top of the Aldwych. They stayed up all night one night. They jumped on them as they left, and they opened the water tanks so that by the time they got to Villiers Street, the there was no more water left to hose people. And they also notified the press about this. So it was just such a nice piece of community activism campaigning. As a kid, I didn't really realize what he was teaching us, me and my brother, but what he was teaching us, we use every day in the museum, which is, if you're creative and if you look after each other and if you stick together, you can find solutions to these sort of, this sort of oppression, these injustices. And so I think things like that in my upbringing have really shaped how I build community today. And it's a complete honor to do so and to be able to put it into practice. And I suppose that's what I mean when I say it feels like an inheritance, or it's like, I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing, basically.
I'm thinking of what makes a great leader, right? And it's the ability to articulate a mission or a project or whatever it may be. And then you need to feel the drive and the fire, because that's the only way you kind of latch onto it. And then it's all wrapped up in that story as well. I call that a perfect pie, if you will. And
That's
then
nice. I like that.
and then I was thinking about, well, okay, there's a leadership aspect. You've got a solid core, you and your husband and your co-founder. But the other bit that you guys do so well, and I don't know if this is effortless as well, but it kind of appears like it is around collaboration. So whether that be with artists, campaigners, grassroots groups, what ones have been most meaningful to your mission and kind of walk along beside you on this path?
Mm. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I think, Yeah, I think we've been so lucky along the way to have amazing partnerships. So we started off working with Groundswell back in the day. That one was really important to the founding of the museum. Um, and then we've got this group we loosely call the Homeless Task Force, which is Streets Kitchen, the Outside Project, the Simon Community, which was the Simon Community was the organisation that like helped my dad when he was homeless. Then it influenced him setting up our community. Um, but they're still going now, so they're like my ancestors, a family, whatever. They're in it. So that that collective of four organisations has been really, really important to the museum. We all um, worked together right through the pandemic. We're often on the streets together doing different things, and we've done a lot of campaigning together. So they're very important partners, and the People's Recovery Project as well. In more recent years, since Ed and Nathan set that up, we've worked very closely with, and I think it's when we set up the museum, we made a conscious decision to work with the grassroots organisations and to remain grassroots rather than partnering with the larger institutions. And it's no shade to the larger institutions, but it works much better for resource sharing and quick, rapid response actions in the grassroots. You can in our experience, you can get a lot more done, and there's a bit less of a power imbalance, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So I find that we're occasionally we've worked with some of the bigger homelessness charities, and it's sometimes been quite difficult, and it's felt a little bit extractive, like what can they get from the museum? Whereas when we work with the grassroots, even though they've got like, I don't know, like let's just say an 80 million turnover, we've
Hmm.
got like a 200,000 turnover, but we're still being taken from. That's crazy. But um, so with the smaller organizations, we found our niche, and we found this there's a real like solidarity and sharing of resource and sharing of support for each other. So that works really well. I hope I haven't forgotten any important partners, but I think they've been the really key ones over the years in homelessness anyway. There's also a bunch of museums and arts organizations that we've worked with. Um, Arts and Homelessness International is one of the has been a really key partner as well over the years in terms of the art side of things.
That's great. And I'm thinking, so I've kind of drew out the leadership piece in you, and then I've drawn out kind of that collaboration and partnership bit, which is hugely important. I would ask you now to put on your visionary glasses a little bit. So, looking ahead, what changes would you most like to see in public understanding, policy, or support systems? And how do you see the museum contributing and feeding that future?
Hmm. Oh, that's such a big question. It's so hard, isn't it? 'Cause at the moment, policy and legislation wise, is such a perfect storm of years and years of really bad policy decisions. That's like so complicated to undo at this point, isn't it? Because you've got like, you've got the hostile environment, then you've got the welfare reforms, which have been devastating, and then you've got, the like the freeze on local housing allowance. I
Yeah.
feel like there's so much that it would take to undo and fix this that would really require all of it. Ideally, we'd have all of those coalition reform package that they did from 2010 onwards to be reversed, but it's not like obviously the Conservatives didn't undo any of that, and then Labour's come in, they haven't undone any of it either.
No.
Um, so it's like, and then since then we've also had COVID, so it's like we've really got we've really got public services that are completely on their knees, and the rise in homelessness at the same time. So I would really like to see all of those policies reversed for a start. And that would probably all of that legislation undone and things put back, resources put back where they should be. That would be um, that would be a good start.
Then I was sitting in Tower Hamlets when I used to be a street outreach manager in Tower Hamlets, and with that lens, you get like a special attachment to the street, the pavement, your coffee shop, situational risk. People that kind of frequent the streets, people who've probably been indoors and then been out again and back and in. I was just kind of sitting there and watching. And what was concerning to me is that I can sit here and talk to everybody and everybody in the world on this podcast about this a specific issue. But what I've seen just sitting in an hour whilst having 2 cups of coffee is I've seen more unwell people than I'd ever seen before. And I mean
Mm,
mentally unwell. I'd
mm,
seen the usual kind of scoring spots in Tower Hamlet, but extreme increased traffic. I've seen more females on the streets than I used to see when I was an outreach manager. I see more young people as well in that short time. So in less than 90 minutes, Jess, already I could see where the institutions are stretched and the streets are becoming an almost an extension of lack of rehab, lack of affordable housing, lack of mental health provision, and it's
yeah,
starting to bleed out into the streets without being too morbid about it. But that's what I've seen, just to be honest.
yeah. I hear you, Leon, and I think, yeah, without being too morbid of it on our side as well, like basically in the Dying Homeless Project, we have you come across that phrase "deaths of despair"? It's
No.
heartbreaking. So it's like deaths where distress, extreme distress, is a contributing factor. Deaths of despair. So it's people completing suicide, um, or dying through drug and alcohol, like extreme addiction. Um, and we're seeing that increase in. We see a significant number of suicides in the community, and we see in the data as well, like the majority of the deaths where we know, I think it's more than 50% now where we know the causes, they'd be categorized as deaths of despair. So exactly what you're saying you witnessed on the street, we're seeing it in the mortality data as well at a population level, and that's heartbreaking because those are preventable deaths. If the
Mm.
people had what they need in terms of mental health services, in terms of rehab, access to rehab or proper harm reduction, just care, you know, somewhere safe to be, those people would be alive. And I think that is the real impact that we're seeing of all of this structural slashing things to ribbons that we've been, those of us working on the front line and stuff like that, we're just seeing it up, you just see it all the time. Yeah.
I've been watching as well the work that you've done around the Dying Homeless Project, and just
Mm,
want to touch upon that for us, Jess, because for me that's the bit where I reflect on everybody I've worked with who are no longer with us, and I think the good and the bad and the ugly within them individual relationships as well, and a real sense of loss and longing in it. And I just wonder, yeah, how you deal with that project, what the aims there are, and just
mm,
vocalize that a little bit so people
mm.
understand because it's super important.
Thank you. So when we first started the museum, the people who were involved at that time said it was really important to have some sort of grief or memorial space as part of the museum's work. So people quite early on said, when our friends die, we can't grieve them. And you'll know, Leon, when someone dies in a hostel, often we don't get to hear about the funeral, or like we won't be able to have a proper goodbye. And deaths in homelessness are wrapped up in so many complicated emotions like anger, guilt, shame, everything. So that was always a purpose of the museum, was to hold space for that grief in some way. And then when the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, Maeve McClenaghan, amazing journalist, she wanted to find out how homeless people were dying, and she found quite quickly there's no records at all. This was in like 2017. So she started counting, and she did an 18-month project to count the deaths for the first time, and went all over the UK trying to find out what was going on. When it came time for her to wrap that project up, we took it on. I phoned her up and said, like, let us continue that work because it's really, really important. It needs to be looked after, and someone needs to keep monitoring it. Some organisation needs to keep monitoring. We'll do it. So that's the Dying Homeless Project. So it's the only project that monitors the deaths in all 4 UK nations.
Mm.
We have a digital memorial. We release our findings annually. So in October every year, we release the findings for the year before. and we hold a vigil, and then we also support people with grief as well. So we work with bereaved parents, we work with people in the community who have lost people, and then we support workers as well. Because for workers, there's not much support when someone dies. Um, and that's the Dying Homes Project. But we've been running it for a number of years now, and we've got some quite rigorous information in the project. We remember people as individuals with a lot of love on our memorial, but we also have like population level data, which can inform policy. And in the last couple of years, when we've released the findings, government has responded with funding. So in 2024, we found that 42%, there was a 42% spike of people dying on the streets.
Yeah.
And so government released 10 million for winter shelters that year and quoted our findings in the press release. So we know it's having a tangible impact, and we're pleased to see that because we're devastated to lose so many people, and we want to see the change.
Yeah, can't speak highly enough for that. The bravery to take on such a thing and then go to the source and continue that on. But I suppose that's what the power of your community is. You sort of carry that together and you drive
Mm.
each other forward with that as well, with the power of that understanding and reflection, right?
We've got a brilliant team. So Jill Taylor, Billy Gay Jackson, James Vell, and Matt, my co-founder, he leads all our investigations work. So he leads that team, and I think is shared well amongst the team. And we have certain processes around supporting each other in with the grief, and because it's a lot, like it's a lot when especially if you're bringing lived experience to it, so there's quite a lot of when writing tributes for people for the memorial, you sometimes you quite often feel like it's your family reflected there in some way. There's things that are familiar about the people's lives. They feel, yeah, we're close to it. So we've worked out methods over the years to help process that and hold it safely, because it's a huge honor to do, but it can be heavy work.
Yeah, I would say that you guys are stronger than me because I think I've only had to lead ceremonies of that nature maybe 3 times in my career, and yeah, not to be too curt, but yeah, I was fucking broken, mate,
Yeah,
each time, and it's like yeah, it's such an important piece, and I think it's really important to mention in the context of today's conversation.
thank
Um,
you.
But just to sort of turn up and put the candlelight back on and brighten the room a little bit, I was thinking about how we land this conversation. And as I said, I've tried to keep it not like the first one, but sort of touching on themes of the first one between us, Jess. So I thought about an elevated finale, a dessert. So I like a closing course of reflections on what you hope the future holds for the museum, for the community. And yeah, like, where are we going, Jess? How do we draw some positive white flags moving forward?
Mm. Oh, I think there's so much. I think there's so much to. So basically, one of the sayings we've got in the museum is "Joy is an act of resistance." That's the poet Toy Derricott wrote that, and we've adopted that. We've got badges of it, and I think we are able to find on this site. We do find those moments of joy together. The creativity really helps as well. So what we're looking forward to at the moment is our next exhibition. So if listeners want to come and visit us from May onwards, we'll, keep an eye out for announcements. We'll be announcing what that's about soon. Super excited about that. And then we've got more plans for the following year as well. I think the artistic, creative community work really helps to balance out some of the pain and distress that a lot of people are going through. So having that within our mix as well really is just a great gift.
And is the winter shelter still cooking along for this time of year as well? And what are you doing for
Yes.
Christmas?
So we've got that's going to be lovely. And it is every year. We've got big Christmas Day at the museum. We do Christmas with all the trimmings. And last year we had 65 people. And if you've been to the museum and seen our tiny kitchen, you would know it's like a small domestic kitchen, like when you'd get in a small flat.
Hmm.
So I don't know how we manage it, but like Jill, who works on the Dying Homes project, she does the turkey in her oven down the road. Like we've we do the beef on site. So it's like the feeding of the 5,000 vibes, but in the best possible way. And then we will be opening the shelter, the emergency shelter from January. So that's just a swept shelter because we're quite a small building. We wouldn't be able to run a full winter shelter, but it's good to use the space for SWEP, and that'll run until until it's needed, March, April.
For me, that's been another extraordinary conversation, Jess, highlighting what you do today. It's reminded me that a museum isn't just a building; it's almost like it's a heartbeat, right? It's the
Oh,
stories we
that's so
choose to
nice.
honor. It's
Yeah.
the people we choose to stand beside and the futures that we dare to imagine. So, if today's episode lifted you, moved you, or opened your eyes, that's the power of the work and the power of all those who shape the Museum of Homelessness from the ground up. Jess, thank you for bringing your fire, your clarity, and your compassion. You've left the space brighter and you found it. Surprise, surprise. To everyone listening, we offer you this energy out. So carry it forward. Keep lifting voices that deserve to be heard. So until next time, stay gold, stay kind, and stay curious. Namaste. Much love, Jess. Thank you.
Thank you so much.